Circumcision is back in the news after a German court ruled the practice amounts to bodily harm even if parents consent. The ruling puts a child's right to ensure the protection of their body ahead of religious freedom and the rights of their parents.
And not surprisingly, there's backlash. Jewish and Muslim leaders in Germany have expressed concern, prompting Germany's foreign minister to reassure faith groups that Germany does protect religious traditions.
Now, to weigh in on this debate, we're joined at Queen's Park today by Grant Wilson from the Children's Rights Council, and next to him, Rabbi Baruch Frydman-Kohl of Toronto's Beth Tzedek congregation. Rabbi, why for thousands of years have infant Jewish boys been circumcised?
Our children, our male children, have been circumcised at the age of 8 days because we see this as a religious commandment. We see this as a connection to the peoplehood of the Jews and to the historic covenant made with Abraham. And Jews have been willing to sacrifice their lives to make sure that their children, their boys, have been circumcised and able to carry on the covenant of Abraham.
Grant, you're strongly against infant circumcision. Obviously, that some people, it's very important to them for different reasons. And let's face it, the babies don't remember it happening. So what's the big deal?
Well, there's a number of issues. If we look at Egyptian Canadians, for example, and look at the Egyptian culture, they've been circumcising women going back for 2,000 or 3,000 years, for example. And if we see those types of circumcision outlined by the World Health Organization, there's 4 different types, and some of those are nothing more than piercing or nicking, and they actually call it female circumcision. So in Egypt, something like 92% of women that are married are circumcised, and over 50% of college-age girls are circumcised as well. But in Canada here, that's aggravated assault. That's illegal. It's even illegal to take your daughter to Egypt, for example, and have any kind of surgery or cutting or piercing of their genital area. So on the one hand, we're talking about Jews and Muslims here and others that believe that there's a reason to circumcise, but in other countries that's just unheard of, such as in Japan, they just don't have male circumcision. The other important point is as I understand it, and I'm not an expert on the Jewish covenants, but a female Jew, when she is born, automatically has this covenant with God. So the question is why is it the females get this protection from genital cutting and males don't? Especially when you're a child. So if somebody believes that, they're 18, they're an adult, they want to go and have part of their genitals cut off, it's full of nerve tissue and, scarring and result in all sorts of things like that, then it's important that, we leave children alone, leave their bodily integrity alone, and, make them, have a choice when they become an adult.
Okay, and that's fair too. Rabbi, tell me, if doctors, if the medical community as a whole said circumcision is unnecessary, it could even be harmful, at what point would modern science trump ancient religious teachings?
Well, first of all, the American Academy of Pediatrics says the issue is up in the air, and it's up to the individual with his or her physician to make that decision. So I want to be very clear that it's not an issue of medical science at all. Secondly, we've been circumcising our boys for thousands of years, and we've been attacked by Roman writers, we've been attacked by Greco-Roman writers, we've been attacked by Christian writers for that procedure. We have maintained consistently that it is something that is in the long-term spiritual benefit of the child. Otherwise, it wouldn't be permissible, because to do anything to somebody else of surgical nature wouldn't be permissible without their benefit. And clearly, we view this as having deep spiritual benefit. And so, I would go even further. Medical science now seems to indicate that there are many reasons why children should be circumcised. And I would say it's a medical ethical issue for parents. They should choose circumcision regardless of whether they're Jewish, Muslim, or any other religious practice. It's in their child's best interests, in addition to the religious interests for the Jewish community.
Grant, when I had my son, I was never approached by a doctor saying it was a good idea to get him circumcised. It was totally up to us. So we decided not to. And I was happy because I don't want to perform any kind of a surgery for non-medical reasons on my child. At the same time, I see parents that pierce their baby's ears, and I get the same kind of physical feeling when I see that, and I think, you know, why would you do that? Why would you do it? Because it's something you want as a parent. So really, if you want to fight against circumcision, shouldn't you also put in like piercings of babies and things like that when there's no medical reason to do it?
I think the key thing here is that every pediatric society across Canada has said there's absolutely no medical benefit to circumcision of males. And that's true. They came out with this back in the 90s. In fact, there was a study by the University of Alberta back in the 90s where they did these with topical anesthetics and used all sorts of different things, and they found the babies were in shock. They weren't just lying there, they were actually in shock and they were in trauma. So it is unethical to cause that kind of damage to a newborn baby. And on top of that, there's some occasional other problems. We saw in March of this year where rabbis, ultra-Orthodox rabbis in New York City made the national news in the U.S. because part of the procedure is for them to suck the blood of the penis of the baby, and they gave the baby herpes and the baby died.
Okay, I do want you to address my question, which was, if you're gonna draw the line at you can't touch a child's body, let them decide when they become an adult. Shouldn't that apply to everything, including piercing?
Well, piercing, for example, depending on what it is reversible, number one. It's not as invasive. It's not taking away tissue. I mean, there's all sorts of argues that you can get into over, you know, piercing, but it basically is reversible. If you take the you know, objects out that are used, then the skin grows back and all this. But it's irreversible with circumcision. And the other thing is that we have a double standard in this country. Egyptian Canadians are talking to me saying, why is it that you know, we have more Canadians that are Muslim Canadians and Arab Canadians and Egyptian Canadians that are saying, well, why are we, you know, doing this for boys and we can't do this for girls? And our criminal code is very clear on this. And it says that you can't do that in Canada. You can't take your daughters over to another country and do this.
All right, you've mentioned that. Rabbi, is there any evidence that suggests that circumcision causes any harm to a young child, young boy?
There are certainly rare instances where there can be some damage to any child for anything, whether that's putting in a test to the baby's skull or foot or drawing blood. But in general, the risk factor is exceptionally low. And even when they study risk factors, they don't factor in religious circumcision. They're usually only testing for medical circumcision. And I can say that the Moalim, those people who are trained ritually, they're specialists. All they do is this. They do it very well. While there is a desire to make sure that there's no hematosis, there's no blood that remains under the skin, and that's why you want to make sure that the blood is suctioned out, I would say that 95% of all Jewish circumcisions are not done orally, but they're done with a suction. There's no Jewish legal requirement for it to be done orally, and that's why it's not allowed. There'll be legislation against that in New York State. The key is differentiating, I think, between what is potentially of significant danger and what is really rare, a rare occurrence. But again, we have thousands of years of history and millions of case studies, so that we are able to say over generations that this is something that has given life to our community and certainly isn't dangerous to our children.
Yes. Thanks so much to our guests today, Rabbi Baruch Frydman-Kohl of Beth Tzedek Congregation in Toronto and Grant Wilson of the Children's Rights Council. Appreciate your perspective today, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.